The first scream of laughter echoed across the marble-floored vault room, sharp and careless, bouncing off steel walls worth more than entire neighborhoods. It was the kind of laugh that believed nothing could ever surprise it again. The billionaire leaned back under the bright daytime skylight, eyes glittering with cruel amusement, and pointed at a massive $200 million safe behind him. His voice rang with mockery as he issued the threat that froze the air. "Open this safe, or your mother is fired today." In that moment, a young black maid's son stood silently, hands shaking, heart pounding, knowing that his entire world was being measured against cold metal and arrogance. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and hidden potential, take a second right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Kindness Tales, because stories like this remind us why humanity still matters. The boy's name was Malachi Reed, 17 years old, slim, with eyes that had learned to observe before they ever learned to dream. The sunlight pouring through the high windows made dust sparkle in the air, as if even the room itself was holding its breath. Malachi had followed his mother to work that morning, the same way he often did during school breaks. His mother, Nadira Reed, had cleaned the billionaire's estate for over a decade, scrubbing floors that reflected people who never truly saw her. She had raised Malachi alone, working double shifts, teaching him discipline, humility, and the strange art of staying invisible in places where wealth shouted too loudly. The billionaire, Conrad Halvorson, was known across the city for his ruthless business instincts and his obsession with control. He collected rare artifacts, vintage cars, and secrets. The safe behind him was legendary, rumored to contain priceless documents, digital keys, and assets that could shake global markets. It was protected by layers of technology, biometric locks, rotating encryption panels, and a custom-built mechanism that no outsider had ever opened. Halvorson loved demonstrations of power, especially when he could turn desperation into entertainment. Malachi had not come to prove anything. He had come because his mother didn't trust leaving him alone in their small apartment, and because she secretly liked having him nearby, even if she never said it out loud. While she cleaned, Malachi usually sat quietly in corners, reading old engineering books he borrowed from the library, or sketching strange mechanical designs in a worn notebook. He had always been drawn to how things worked, how pressure shifted, how systems failed. But none of that mattered in a room where money spoke louder than intelligence. When Halvorson noticed Malachi staring at the safe earlier that day, something cruel sparked in his mind. He asked questions not out of curiosity, but out of hunger for humiliation. A maid's son, standing near a vault worth more than his entire bloodline combined. The challenge was issued in daylight, with security cameras rolling, executives watching, and Nadira standing frozen near the wall, her uniform suddenly feeling heavier than iron chains. Malachi felt the weight of his mother's sacrifice pressing against his chest. He remembered mornings when she skipped breakfast so he could eat, afternoons when she came home exhausted but still checked his homework, nights when the power went out and she lit candles, telling him stories about dignity and patience. The threat wasn't just about a job. It was about survival, about rent, about respect that had never been freely given. The billionaire laughed again, confident, relaxed, already tasting victory. To him, this was a game. To Malachi, it was everything. He stepped closer to the safe, the polished steel reflecting his face back at him. Not fear, not anger, but focus. His mind quieted, the way it always did when he studied machines. He noticed details others overlooked. The faint vibration near the bottom hinge. The subtle delay between light pulses on the encryption panel. The safe wasn't just locked. It was breathing, cycling through patterns meant to intimidate rather than protect. Malachi placed his palm against the metal, feeling temperature changes, listening with his ear pressed lightly to the surface. He remembered something his late grandfather once said while fixing a broken radio in their living room during a bright afternoon. Machines tell you their secrets if you listen long enough. People usually don't. Security guards shifted uncomfortably. Executives whispered. Nadira closed her eyes, silently praying, not for success, but for mercy. Malachi began tracing invisible paths with his fingers, aligning pressure points, counting seconds between internal clicks. The safe system was designed by experts, but experts often built for ego, not empathy. They assumed no one without access codes would ever dare touch it long enough to learn its rhythm. That assumption was their flaw. Sweat formed at Malachi's temples as the room seemed to shrink around him. He adjusted his stance, applied pressure where heat met resistance, and waited. Time stretched. The billionaire's smile began to thin, irritation creeping in like a crack in glass. Then it happened. A soft, almost shy sound. A release. The massive safe door unlocked with a deep mechanical sigh, swinging open under the full glare of daylight. Silence crashed down harder than any applause ever could. Inside lay stacks of secure drives, documents, and sealed cases glowing faintly under internal lights. Proof, wealth, power, and disbelief. Malachi stepped back, his hands trembling now not from fear, but from the sudden release of it. The billionaire's face drained of color, laughter replaced by stunned stillness. The executives stood frozen, unable to reconcile what they had just witnessed. The cameras kept rolling, capturing a moment no one would ever forget. Nadira opened her eyes and gasped, tears blurring her vision as she covered her mouth. In that instant, her son was no longer invisible. Halvorsen forced a laugh, weaker this time, scrambling to regain control. But something fundamental had shifted. The game had turned on its master. A boy he had dismissed as nothing had done the impossible in broad daylight, not with arrogance, but with quiet understanding. The billionaire tried to frame it as luck, as a fluke, but the room didn't believe him anymore. Neither did he, deep down. For the first time in years, Conrad Halvorsen felt small. Malachi didn't celebrate. He didn't smile. He walked back to his mother and stood beside her, his presence suddenly powerful without effort. He had opened more than a safe. He had cracked open a lie the world often tells itself, that brilliance wears expensive suits and speaks loudly. What happened next rippled far beyond that room. Halvorsen, under pressure from witnesses and his own shaken pride, didn't fire Nadira. He did something unexpected. He offered Malachi a scholarship, mentorship, and access to training programs most people could only dream of. Not out of kindness, but out of recognition that ignoring talent like that was bad business. Malachi accepted none of it immediately. He asked for time. Time to finish school. Time to breathe. Time to understand that his worth had never depended on a billionaire's approval. In the days that followed, daylight stories spread across the city. A maid's son who opened a $200 million safe. A laugh that died midair. A reminder that intelligence grows in places society refuses to water. Near the end of this story, if your heart feels heavy or hopeful, if you felt that quiet victory settle deep inside you, please take a moment to like, comment, and share this video. Your engagement helps stories like Malachi's reach people who need to believe again. Before this story ends, we have a special request for you. Please comment one word that describes how this story made you feel. One word can travel further than you imagine. That afternoon, as the sun dipped slightly but still ruled the sky, Malachi and his mother walked out of the estate together. No applause followed them. No cameras chased them down the driveway. Just light, warmth, and the steady sound of footsteps moving forward. For the first time, Malachi didn't feel like the world was locked against him. He knew now that some doors weren't meant to keep people out, but to reveal who was brave enough to open them. And somewhere behind them, a billionaire stared at an open safe, finally understanding that true value isn't stored in steel, but in overlooked minds waiting for a chance.